Welcome, Ultras, Switchy Sisters, and Danonites alike to episode 48 of the weekly episodic gaming-adjacent livestream podcast show. This is Switch to Ultra on Tuesday nights after the weekend. We thought today's episode would be solely centered around the newest major Nintendo release in Tomodachi Life Living the Dream, but yet again, on a random Tuesday, how fortuitous, right before we go live, Nintendo releases a trailer for Splatoon Raiders, including its release date. It seems prices are in shift again, as even Game Pass seems to be lowering its level of entry now due to pushback. This could also possibly add fuel to the fire of several rumors from weeks back. I'm your co-parent, BHultra.
And I am your co-parent, Switchy.
And I'm your Funkle Dan.
And today we are joined by another very special guest, adding another to the long lineage of people I never thought in a million years would ever see my YouTube videos. We are joined by indispensable member of the Source Gaming translating team, PushDustIn.
Hey, it's great to be here.
And I'd like to say also for my regular viewers, and you can correct me if I'm wrong at any point, this might be too much hyperbole, but in my Super Smash Bros. Ultimate videos, exceeding 24 hours in total, I guess, almost every week building up to the game included an important weekly Sakurai Famitsu column. And I believe that you translated all of them for Source Gaming?
Yeah, basically for about 10 years, if there was Smash news outside of Nintendo, it came from Source Gaming, which was it was crazy because it was like from Smash for 3DS Wii U, a little bit before that, all the way through Sora's release.
That's awesome.
Wow.
And all of
Wow.
that to say, the Smash video probably would not exist the way it does without PushDustIn. So I have to thank you in this very roundabout way. And
Thank you.
I'll be honest, I'm feeling the walls a little bit. More and more I see YouTubers plotting out their personal rosters for a hypothetical next Smash game. People in my chat asking me if I think there's a new one over the horizon. Even friends in my personal life texting me to ask when the next one's coming out. This is a topic we've covered before on the show, all with differing answers, and we do have certainly a number of segments to do later in the show of asking you questions. But I just want to ask you this first. What do you think the likelihood and timeline looks like for that next hypothetical Smash Bros. Game?
Mhm. I think like because Nintendo has been having, a relatively good year. Switch 2s are still selling. Um, I don't think it's as doom and gloom as people have been really making out to be. But so because of that, I think Nintendo's not really in a rush to announce a new Smash. So I think like it will be, at the earliest September, latest June of next year.
See, that I understand because I had a question before. I think people are just excited, and I don't want to ever like snuff out that excitement because I understand that. But I saw somebody asking like, "Oh, there's no holiday game for 2026. What if Smash is that?" And it's like we're already almost in the summer. That would require a really
Mhm.
quick turnaround because like Smash
Well, they
Ultimate.
did do that with Smash Ultimate. I mean,
Yeah, but that was
or wait,
announced
never
in
mind. They announced it
March.
in March. My bad. They just really showed it off in June.
Yeah. Well, I think that we're
I
still
was so
due
ready. I was so ready. I
to
was so
argue.
ready to like,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Well,
speaking of
actually-
arguments, we just said how the Switch 2's been doing pretty okay. I feel like more and more I see it's not even really what I would call discourse. I think just and it seems such a shitty thing to do to be like, oh, anyone that disagrees with me is just jealous. They're just a hater. But I am seeing more and more I don't think there's anything wrong with like critiquing Nintendo. I like to think that's what we do as well. But this rising idea that like Nintendo is a very anti-consumer company because they're making exclusives for the Switch 2 that require you to buy a Switch 2. I've often seen it when talking about Tomodachi Life, which isn't even a Switch 2 exclusive, but you do need to play it on the Switch. And it feels like, I know it's, we're doing the Goomba situation where it's not the same people saying this at all, but I feel like the tune last year was that there weren't enough exclusives. And it is a little bit funny now that there is a direct like line of when they decided, okay, we need to start pricing these games a little differently, and that Mario Tennis seemed to be the cutoff, that $70 Mario Tennis. But I also like to think that at some point there was a big meeting where they were putting the prices together, like, well, no, we have to make it has Mario in it. It can't be anything less than that.
Mhm.
But I want to ask you, Push, as well, that like I think now just because I've like made that video and do this show on occasion that people will come to me not as like an expert but just to like hear what I have to say. And obviously you don't know Masahiro Sakurai personally, but you have I think a better grasp of what goes on in his head than the average person after years and years of translating. Has there ever been a moment where people were like, "Oh, well, obviously he's gonna do this," and it just kind of sat with you wrong because you're like, why are you making sweeping generalizations about this guy?"
Yeah, like I think like one thing that I think Sakurai has kind of known to be is someone who kind of really values how the players will look at his games. Like if you look at all of his projects, he's never done just a simple remaster or a simple like expansion pack. That's never really sat with Masahiro Sakurai. He's always tried to like one up himself, always tried to deliver like a premium experience and thinking about how it will land with consumers. And if you look at like Kirby Air Riders for the Switch 2, I think like it could have been a lot less content, and Nintendo would have been happy with it. But Sakurai went through and added all the content from the almost all the content from the original GameCube release, and really put an emphasis on delivering something that was, I think, unique.
They also put more, not pressure per se, but a lot of equity behind the idea of like the full game is going to release at launch, and that seems to be rare nowadays. But also under the guise of saying that, like, oh yeah, it wouldn't be updated after release, which isn't necessarily true. And not even in the sense that they like added patches, because our co-host Dan was having issues early on just being able to not find Dynablade at all before that update that actually like helped out with that. But also just
Don't
like
remind me.
individual trials in the game and even like costuming. But I would say, or I would think that that game is finished. Whatever team was working on it has fully moved on to whatever the next thing is. And I have been sort of making assumptions because it seemed like the main point of speculation, maybe in 24, a couple years back, was the founding of, I believe it's called Studio S, Studio 2, or maybe the other way around, Studio 2, Studio S. The Bandai Namco in-house subsidiary that would primarily work on Nintendo products. And now, of course, we know what the S and the 2 would stand for. And Bandai Namco has their hands in Kirby Air Riders. And there's other companies, obviously, like Koei Tecmo. I talked about this in the video, that like for the first year of exclusives on the Switch 2, it was primarily Bandai Namco and Koei Tecmo. A very close relationship working with the company, that I don't think it's impossible that Masahiro Sakurai and the Sora team and Bandai Namco couldn't have been working on multiple games at once. I think the main piece that people tend to bring up, or maybe I bring it up, not even as like evidence, but just something we heard, is the job listing from Studio 2 Studio S that said that Bandai Namco was working on both a 3D action game and a 2D action game. And at the time, and still ever since then, people have been clamoring for a Kid Icarus Uprising remake, like even more so than Smash, maybe just because that idea is really centralized, and the idea of a new Smash is kind of split amongst multiple thought groups. That's what the Twitch chat is saying now, asking what the next game could be. And we have predictions we make on the show. They're not necessarily predictions we want to happen as much as they are what we think is going to happen. And I believe when we made those predictions at the start of the year, Switchy and Dan, one of you said that it would be a fully new game, and one of you said it would be like a Switch 2 style deluxe game. And to split the difference, I made my prediction like, oh, they're just going to do both of those things. They'll release a Switch 2 edition of Ultimate and then also a new one. And I will
Imagine how much of a clusterfuck it would be if they actually did that. Like,
yeah, well,
that'd
that's
be
the
like
thing,
such
like,
a nightmare.
if it's like a half measure, it's like, okay, we'll release this to like bridge the gap because new game won't be out for a long while. Because I don't really expect it to be out for a long while. But I would definitely, personally, much rather prefer a new Smash game that might be even a little less than just like more Ultimate. And every Smash game is built off of the previous to a certain degree. But like you said, there's little details that I think they really pride themselves in. And for me, going back to that old Smash video, which I guess is only like 2 or 3 years old now, so much of the fun of that new game was just like, what does the art style look like? What does it sound like? What are the stages? Like Battlefield looks ever so slightly different. And the argument against that is that we don't want characters or anything in the game to change too much. But having gone back to play something like Brawl or Melee, like people will still play Brawl and Melee. And even like Smash 64, there's always something to go back to. The way the game Melee was sold to me as a kid is just like, I loved playing Brawl, and then my slightly older friend showed up and said like, well, you know, they have a game with Mewtwo
Hey, you
in
don't want
it.
to try weight bashing?
Yeah, it sold me. It's like, you know, Mewtwo's in this game, which is true, but it took me a while to even get to Mewtwo. I had to leave my GameCube on overnight. So instead, I just became a Dr.
That's the
Mario.
way.
When
That's
I
the
played
only
Melee,
way.
I only played Dr. Mario because, like, oh, this guy isn't in Brawl. That's so cool. So the idea is like, especially because the Switch 2 is backwards compatible. I didn't have a GameCube. I put my Melee in the Wii. The idea that's like, oh, why? I don't see the purpose of having an Ultimate Deluxe on a console that can already run Ultimate. Because if the comparison is like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe or Pokken, the Switch was not backwards compatible with the Wii U.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing YouTube chat say
Yeah.
also. Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. Like, I think like you know, having Ultimate already playable on the Switch 2 kind of diminishes the you know, the appeal of you know, Ultimate Plus. For me, like, I feel like they have like two paths, and it's really up to you know, Nintendo how they want to see the long-term viability of the series, and then also like, you know, how quickly do they need a game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned before, I think like the Switch 2 has been doing pretty well. I don't think they're really in a tough spot where they need to kind of get a premium version of Ultimate, because as you mentioned, Ultimate is basically a premium version of Smash for Wii U, more so than any other game. And so like I feel like personally, like if I was in Nintendo shoes, one thing that I would consider is the long term, how will future Smash games get made? Because Masahiro Sakurai, he's getting quite old now. We've had a number of Nintendo legends retire in the last 5 years. Switch was kind of like the swan song for a lot of the Famicom era developers, and Masahiro Sakurai, he only has a few more games left in him before he's going to fully retire. And so I think like Nintendo's in a really tough spot because they really need someone to take over after Sakurai. And so I thought this was going to happen with Ultimate as well, but it didn't. I thought they would have kind of Sakurai train a director or have some sort of person who was kind of his heir to kind of train succeed him after the title. I think he'll still make another Smash. I think he'll return. I think all the evidence that you mentioned about Bandai Namco having a team in place. I think the arrangement for Wii U and Ultimate was really beneficial for both Bandai Namco and Nintendo, and for Sakurai. So I think like they will continue that. I think the main question for me is just like, what are they going to do to prepare for the future of Smash? Because there's always going to be another Smash. There's always going to be another Mario Kart.
Yeah.
So my idea was like that they would kind of lean more into like a light live service game, where it's kind of like you have like a monthly or bi-monthly character drop. You can kind of see them kind of testing that with the Fighters Pass, I think. And I think like that kind of model just makes a lot of sense for Smash because it keeps it relevant. It allows them to keep balancing the game.
That was my exact same idea. The idea of just having like a game that is supported throughout the entire lifespan of the console. And honestly, I kind of thought that's what they were going to do with Mario Kart. I don't think it's impossible that we get more Mario Kart DLC. But I was kind of hoping, because, the strange omissions from Mario Kart, and not the kart omissions, are the fact that Donkey Kong and Pauline have very few I think each one alternate costume, and both of them had like a paired game coming out a couple months after that.
Yeah.
So the idea was that like, people thought, when Bonanza comes out, it will coincide with Mario Kart DLC, whether that be paid DLC or not. In a perfect world, I picture it being like Rosalina in Mario Kart Wii, where if you had Galaxy on your console, like save data, you could have that character. I don't think that they would do that in 2026, but I think it's a fun idea if they do really want to, because people have been wondering like, a Smash Kart for years. I really don't love that idea, because the fun of Mario Kart for me is what we got with Mario Kart World, is just having so many obscure Mario characters. And I suppose the fear is also there with like the movies, and I know people talk about like big crossover Nintendo movie as well, but it really just was like Mario Galaxy and Mario characters, and then also Star Fox was there, which isn't a spoiler because it was all over the marketing for the entire movie. But it's interesting that we bring up how heavily Ultimate was built on top of Smash 4 and the individual communities for those older Smash games. That it seemed, for a while, I saw it happen in real time, and I was kind of gleeful about it because I started with Brawl, so I grew up with Brawl, and that was one of my favorites. Like, emotional, I think Ultimate's probably my emotional favorite, but Brawl is like similar to Ultimate, but a little bit worse, and has a lot of features that people don't like. I've seen that shift, and as I want to ask you, as someone who was following that game very early on and all the way up to that game's launch, and then also like through Ultimate, do you have any strong feelings about Smash 4? Has your opinion of it changed?
So for me, like my all-time favorite Smash game is still Smash Ultimate, just because I feel like with every Smash game it just gets better. And then the second game that holds that place in my heart is probably Melee, just because that's the one I grew up with. I actually created like a Smash Forums account around Melee's like release. So I've been in I was in the community for a while. And then for Smash 4, Wii U and 3DS, like that has like a lot of emotional connection for me because of Source Gaming. I started Source Gaming like probably like 3 months before 3DS was released.
Wow.
And I did I was like originally responsible for all the data mining for the 3DS and Wii U. So like,
So you're the reason we know about Dark Pit.
Yeah. So like, yeah, it has like I was like very invested in 3DS and Wii U, but I do think like I do agree that Ultimate is the better game, just in every way. There's not really much reason to go back for Wii U at this point.
Unless you're a really big fan of custom moves. There's a very specific Palutena affirmation that is like, this is the meta. We have to do this. That there's, I mean, that's, the videos I made are about that, really just like the lead up to the game and how that felt in such a distilled amount of time. And I bring up the chat from before that summer to winter isn't enough time, but I think like spring to winter is the perfect spot, because all throughout that year, looking back, Smash Ultimate definitely had like a tumultuous launch. Like people really liked it, but the more and more you think about like the game on base game, there was definitely a lot of features that they wanted to have in the game. It seems more and more the more research I do about the DLC, and you could either corroborate or disagree with this, because I want to know for sure, that it seems like a lot of the DLC characters in the Fighters Passes were characters that were just planned for the base game anyway, but they didn't have the time to finish them.
I think like they probably decided on those characters relatively early, because like licensing, those kinds of contracts, that takes a lot of time, and then like development. I think like one thing that people outside of the game industry don't really understand is that development's not really linear. You have many parts of a project being worked on at one time, and so like you can say like, yeah, like Steve, for example, was probably decided very early, but the actual development work and stuff like that probably didn't start until much later.
I believe there actually was a Famitsu column, which I have to assume that you translated, from maybe 20 or 21, where Sakurai said that Steve was the first character fully developed during the pandemic. So that would have had to have been way later. It also gave us like a general timeline for how long the characters take, more or less. And I think it was somewhere from like 6 to 8 months, because it had to have been, when he said it, it was like October maybe. So it had to have been when the pandemic was already in full swing, which is only a handful of months. But we bring up Sakurai a lot, and obviously that, the director of the games, and there's so much of that connection that now exists through the YouTube channel, or I guess did exist through his YouTube channel. And the only connection we got was those translated Famitsu columns that we saw it in the 2000s on the internet, specifically with this level of idolatry when it comes to like Miyamoto. And that was because obviously the people who were making videos online, your normal boots and your Mega 64s, grew up with those NES and Super Nintendo games, and he had his hands in all of them. And that isn't quite the case in like a post-Pikmin world, but I feel like the only idolatry that still exists for is like Masahiro Sakurai and maybe Hideo Kojima. And you're right when you say that. I don't agree necessarily that the games like have to be Masahiro Sakurai. I know that people feel very strongly about that. The idea that like if the next game didn't involve him, then it wouldn't be Smash Bros. And it wouldn't have the same heart. I disagree to a certain degree, because I think Sakurai has very specific hang-ups on things that like I don't necessarily agree with. But you're right. It would be near impossible to find a replacement. Not that they couldn't direct a good game, but have that same connection, because this is really the only example I could think of where a game director that isn't like an indie developer has this sort of cooperative relationship with the fan base to the point where Smash Bros. Is often remembered for the reveal trailers and reactions more so than the actual game and gameplay of it all.
Mhm.
We also brought up...
Yeah,
oh, no, go ahead.
I just linked in our chat. There's actually a development timeline that I put together on Source Gaming.
Ooh.
So negotiations for Steve actually began in like 2014.
Yes.
Wow.
And then I think in 2017,
That's nuts,
when
by the way.
That I
really
do
is
believe.
nuts.
Was it 2014 like before the big like reboom of Minecraft 2? Isn't that crazy?
Well,
Like,
they
there
were
was that
getting it
big
on the
boom
ground
and, like-
floor. Well, when did it release for the
insane.
3DS and Wii U? It had to have been like around...
2014.
Yeah, probably. It's also like thinking like now we...
I think you mean the new Nintendo 3DS.
Oh,
It was
sorry,
not the
my mistake. The
3DS
new
game.
Nintendo 3DS XL with the circle pad. That we know what Steve looks like in Smash. And the same thing happened when I was doing the Smash video of like, okay, well we haven't seen Banjo yet. So we have to use like fan renders of what we thought Banjo would look like, and it's so different.
remember those.
And the same
They're
goes for
so
Steve where
ugly.
like you see videos of people doing like, oh, my Smash 4 mods, and it's just Steve like plastered over Link because he has like a bow and arrow and a sword.
Lest we forget that
Uh,
ugly Steve period. Remember that when it's like when Banjo got in, it's like, oh, Steve's never gonna get in now. And it was that ugly Steve model, and
Oh
that
yeah.
still haunts my dreams to this day.
There was a weird like cultural, because at first I was like, okay, people who wanted Banjo didn't want Steve because he was getting in the way of Banjo. But as soon as Banjo was
'Cause it was a
added, I was like,
Microsoft thing.
oh,
the
it would,
Microsoft
yeah,
crap.
we shouldn't care about Minecraft now. But no, people felt like super strongly about like, no, he can't be in the game.
Yeah, there's like this common like thought in the Smash community where it's like a zero sum, where it's like it's either my character or yours, and it's not going to be at both of ours.
Yeah.
And it's just like that's not the case.
But just the idea of like deserving a slot is just really not how it works at all. 3DS Minecraft version was 2017 post Switch. That's nuts. Well, that means they were still in talks. I wonder who would have prompted those, because you would think that like Steve was just a character on the ballot, and the ballot didn't. Oh no, the ballot closed in 2015, but I think the ballot began. I'm looking at it right here, April 2015. So that would have had to start before then. I wonder if it's like Nintendo was like, oh, Minecraft's really big, we need Steve, or if they went to Microsoft or Microsoft came to them. Had Microsoft even bought Mojang by that point?
I think that might have been like I don't
Yeah.
remember.
That must have been like 15, 16
Yeah.
era.
So they were really on the pulse of what the gamers wanted. And that's interesting too, that like this isn't necessarily something that I feel strongly about, but whenever people talk about indie games being in the game, I like the idea of the Mii costumes repping all these different indie games. Like I don't know if I'd want a playable Freddy Fazbear in Smash Bros, but I think it'd be nice to have a little Mii costume, because it's, you know, when I'm still thinking back to Smash Ultimate, like yeah, maybe in 2018 the idea of like Among Us or Freddy Fazbear being represented in the game is like ridiculous, but in 2026, like a lot of those
I can
games
kind of see it.
are huge, yeah. But I don't know if I would want them as like a playable character. Obviously, I have a bias now that I've played Deltarune that I would like a proper Underrune character. But beyond that, I think that there's a lot of untapped potential with the Mii costumes, because it was just Shovel Knight and Sans and Cuphead. Like if you really
And,
leaned into
Shantae.
that.
And
And
Shantae.
Shantae, right? I always forget
Yeah.
that she's an indie character.
I think she was the last one, right?
The last Mii costume?
No, the last like special Mii costume that came with like a song.
Did the Doomslayer come with one, or did they just play it
I
during
don't
the
think
trailer?
the Doomslayer came with one. I
Hmm.
don't think it came with one.
We're
I
still holding
could
out
be
for that
wrong.
Kako Demon hat, though. There's still time.
There's some time.
It's any of those moments. Well, actually, I do want to get into that a little bit, because I didn't know. I got into Source Gaming, I think, around the time of the Smash for Wii U and 3DS launch, and that's kind of when I wanted to get in earlier as well. That like Smash Ultimate was such lightning in a bottle just that entire year of 2018, and then the DLC kind of carried afterwards, that I kind of fell out of the excitement of Smash 4 as it was happening and didn't follow it as religiously, even though I got both of the games. And I think it's because it was like a much longer timeline. Like when it first was announced and we saw Mega Man and the Wii Fit Trainer, and then I think a month after Little Mac, and then maybe like the autumn following that was Rosalina, and it was at like a fever pitch.
It was
and then,
basically like once per direct for like the next year.
yeah, well, that's the thing is that like the game was announced like I think 2 or so years before it came out on the Wii U. Maybe that's rounding up, but it didn't like spin its wheels. Obviously, that leak didn't help. Maybe if they announced Shulk and we didn't know Shulk was coming, it would have been a bigger deal. But I forgot what my question was going to be. I brought that up for a
it's
very
weird how they
specific
did
reason.
trailers for Smash 4, because if you remember, something like the Pac-Man reveal trailer, wasn't that originally like shown off to investors or something, if I'm remembering correctly? Like, it's so weird how they handled the Smash 4 trailers. Although I gotta say, like, if we're comparing trailers, I kind of prefer the Smash 4 era of trailers. Like, I think those had a little more hype behind them. Not to say I didn't like the Ultimate ones. I love the Ultimate ones, but like, there's something about the Smash 4 ones that kind of like tickle the funny bone a little bit more, and I think it kind of like clicks with me a little bit more.
Yeah, it kind of seemed like a certain point that because we do or do not know that the director feels very strongly about the cutscenes from Brawl being leaked out. So instead, that what would have been going towards like CG cutscenes in game, that effort and budget was rather put towards the reveal trailers. And in Smash 4, they felt like their own individual worlds, especially like the Palutena one, that's just a completely different art style for that reveal trailer. Whereas as we got more and more DLC characters, there were, I think, like 2 or 3 reveal trailers that like included Darkon and Galeem and all the like shadow, like basically trying to tie it into the world of light. And for example, like the Banjo one tying into the K. Rool one, that's sort of, it is Donkey Kong's spot, but it's also like, oh, that just becomes a Smash location, as opposed to going into their individual worlds. Although the Isabelle one was built into the actual Animal Crossing. But the question I had is more about the lore of it all, of what went into starting Source Gaming around the time of Smash 4. And what has it been like to get more people into work on that? Or has the team gone relatively unchanged?
So I founded Source Gaming a little bit before Smash 4 3DS launched, and like the main, like, I guess the reason that I started it was because I had joined Smash forums, and there was like a league group that was started by a fellow named like Blue Pigman, and I was like super active in it. And just sharing like theories and like trying to find out information about the next Smash game. And I remember watching a Game Explained video actually, where they had like showed some Japanese text on the screen, and they're just like, "Oh, we don't know what this says," and I was just like screaming in the comments.
Good
I was
job,
like,
guys.
"I can read this." So, I started like and at the time like I was doing I was an English teacher in Japan, and so I felt like I wanted to do something that was creative, do something that would help me work on my English, so I wouldn't be in this, wouldn't lose my English ability. And so I wanted to write, and so I started Source Gaming. The other alternative path was starting a blog that was focused on the series Community by Dan Harmon. That was the
I love Community.
other
That's
choice.
awesome. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And then so I started Source Gaming, and then like I started like doing translations, stuff like that, and then I started looking into like histories of other Smash titles, because people were at the time were saying like, oh, Wolf was planned for Melee and stuff like that, and I was like, well, where's this information?
Yeah.
And so I started going through and like meticulously collecting all of this information, some of it from like old stuff that was like on the web archive. Some of it was like from physical magazines and stuff that I would order and like read through and translate. And just build out like a full source where people can reference, kind of trying to be like a Cerebi or a Starman of Smash, because I felt like that was like kind of missing in the Smash community. And so I just went through and like tried to find as much information as I can and try to be like a more reliable source, so that way people could enjoy, kind of have like stuff that they could point to and be like, okay, I can trust this because this is like verifiable. And like we'd always like try to like, like the name says, source everything, so that way people could go and do independent research on themselves as well.
Well, people were just saying anything. I guess they still do when it comes to Smash Bros. I've just repeated stories. But yeah, like, I mean, so much of that, not that it went uncredited, but like the timelines of Smash 4 and Smash Ultimate, whenever you go to, if it was an important, it specifically Famitsu or just anything that required translating, whether it be from a Game Explain video or like a Papagino's video or like Aaron Itmar, they would all say like, oh yeah, this is translated by PushDustIn. So I would imagine anyone that had seen videos from that time had heard the name, but now they're putting the voice to the name. And I guess the story is there for the translator. How did you begin becoming a translator? What was that journey looking like?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, like I live in Japan, and so like I use English and Japanese on a daily basis, and when I started Source Gaming, like I was like, well, I want to start translating this material into English, because I saw that there was a divide on the way that the Japanese Smash community would discuss things and the way that the English community would discuss things. And so I figured I'd help bridge that gap. In order to help me, I actually recruited a number of translators for Source Gaming. We had I think 6 or 7 different translators.
Nice.
Probably the most prolific was Soma, but so many others have helped, like coming on like throughout the years. And we went through and read all of Sakurai's messages that he posted on the Smash dojos for Melee and Smash 64, and like dug up all that information. Yeah, I was a part of, I ran Source Gaming for 10 years, and then after Sora released, I kind of got burnt out of Smash, of talking about Smash, and so I actually left Source Gaming shortly after Sora was released.
I mean, that's a good time for that to happen, considering that was like, people still play Ultimate, but that truly was like the final, not nail in the coffin, but it was a send-off to the game, even by the staff themselves.
Now, yeah, I will say for me personally, I know you specifically, I do know you from Source Gaming, but what I really know you from is your podcast Memory Card. That's
thank you.
What I really know you from. No, you're welcome. I specifically remember the episodes on the Sega Mega Jet, and specifically the Donkey Kong Country Book Club episodes. Those are ones I used to go back to all the time. Those I thought were the funniest ones. And I just wanted to throw that in there because I realized if I didn't mention that, I would never get a chance to say that again. So thank you and Ben for being an informative, entertaining podcast.
There really are like oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we started Memory Card kind of because because I was a little bit burnt out of Smash content, we wanted to still do video game history and video game content, and so that's why Ben and I we started Memory Card after I left Source Gaming.
People primarily know you as talking about Smash Bros. And translating Smash Bros. Are there any other major, not just Nintendo series, but video game series that you have that same passion for?
Well, I actually work in the games industry now as like a professional marketer. So I work with mainly VR. So like a lot, but some of the titles I've worked on are like Trombone Champ VR.
My boss likes that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I helped out with you know, doing the marketing, managing the store pages, stuff like that. And then I've also worked with a Japanese company doing original VR titles as well.
For developing the VR games, is that similar to if you're developing for console/PC, where there may be some hiccups depending on the VR headset that you're using? And if so, do you find one specifically easier to develop for than others?
Yeah, I think like working on VR is kind of like, you know how Roller Coaster Tycoon was like written in assembly code and it's just like insanely optimized. I think like most VR developers, like you have to have kind of that same mindset. They're like following in that path of like early computing, because in order to make something work in VR properly, especially like off of a PC, is just truly magical, because like you have two devices that you need to render from, like make code run from, and there's just so many different variables, right? So for me, developing for the MetaQuest platform, especially like the 3 and 3S, that's by far the easiest because it's standalone. But in terms of like what I actually really like to use, is actually I think Pico is a little bit more comfortable.
Nice. I do want to hear a little bit more about, you said that the Smash communities in both Japan and the States differ a lot. Have you seen that with specific characters being announced, being released? Because I've definitely seen both highs and lows over here. I'm interested to hear how, I guess, the Japanese audience reacted to characters like Minecraft Steve. I remember over here that a lot of people didn't seem to know who Terry was, despite, the SNK character leaking like the night before. So people were like, oh, it's probably Terry. But a lot of people were very unfamiliar with that character. Does that same thing happen over there with characters that may be more popular over here?
I would say like people in Japan, like they really appreciated characters like King K. Rool. Banjo is probably the one that was like, oh, this is definitely for the non-Japanese crowd, because Banjo wasn't as big compared to other characters. And I remember with Terry, there was like some surprise in the Japanese Smash community about how many people didn't know who Terry was outside of Japan. Those are the only ones that kind of really stick out. For the most part, it's like, Steve is pretty popular outside of in Japan and outside of Japan. Sora, is well known everywhere. I would say those are probably the biggest ones.
I will say also, if I were talking about Source Gaming, that we still don't know the results of the ballot. But if we're going to give people flowers for everything I talked about in Smash Bros., that there were so many fan-made Smash ballots that were just like, oh, we'll source from people and we'll try and compile together a lot of different pie charts. I remember there was one that was like split between the different territories. Like, okay, well, Japan wants Sora the most. And those are just like from the people they could source. I remember you guys trying to do something similar as well, because everyone was really scrambling to just figure out the ballot. And because even when Bayonetta first came out, people were like, this doesn't add up. Like, something's wrong here. Evidently, that ended up being that they were just sourcing characters for Smash Ultimate. That's why I'd be a little bit tentative maybe for like a next Smash Bros. Game, is that the Smash ballot was 2015, and that was 3 years before Ultimate came out. And not that they would like necessarily have to do that again, but if they want to get it, well, I guess now in the internet age with like how tied these developers and companies are to the marketing and to the social media, I'm sure they know which characters people want, and maybe they don't care. And honestly, I think that's the best philosophy to go forward with it, is just not caring as much, because that's really what I want to see. So for the most part, what we've been trying to do, I wanted to real quick also that you mentioned like getting into it through Smash 4 and even before that in different forums, and how important that was to like even us when we were watching and while we were watching being younger and having those same ideas. And I feel like a lot of what I do online, whether it be for videos or a stream like this, a podcast like this, it's just stuff I really liked watching as a kid and just thinking like, man, I want to like be a part of that, whatever that is. And this podcast really exists to cover all of the Switch 2 stuff. I've always wanted to do something like this, but I think the Switch 2 releasing was a good framing device, as we can cover it week by week, and we could jump into that in a sec. But also, it's so interesting that so many of these like popular YouTubers, or just Nintendo YouTubers specifically in the scene, seem to always come along with a new Smash game. And we saw a lot of that in Smash 4. Obviously, Brawl was like very early YouTube days, so people were already establishing that. There are a number of names that like, oh, these are people that I would watch weekly that I got into solely through the speculation aspect of Smash 4. And the same thing goes with Ultimate. You're seeing people like who weren't necessarily speculators, but people like Scott the Woz and Arlo that came at that same era that obviously coincided with the new Nintendo console. And, you know, don't want to shoot too high. Would like to be something like that for a new Smash game. And it's just an interesting microcosm of the internet to see that happen with multiple different creators and multiple different platforms. My point being, as we go through all this information, random information, there was I guess before I can show off this, the main thread we've been following, on top of the games coming out and lead up to the Mario movie and reviews on that, is that there was a rumor, I suppose is the word, but it was just a podcast from, I don't know if I'd say fellow podcast or, you know, different brackets. Nate the Hate, who is known for the most part predicting, it seems like, the release dates of Directs. So I was a little tentative to even believe, like, okay, maybe he could be right that the next Direct won't happen until the summer, but all this other stuff, I'm not so sure. Really batting for the fences with the likes of a new Star Fox game or Ocarina of Time remake, you know, stuff that kind of sounds fake on paper. But more and more, as we're going through the weeks, it seems like the main story there was that all the games we know about that were in the previous summer's Nintendo Direct and the September Nintendo Direct won't have their own major Direct and will instead be announced via their own trailers. Not randomly, but just given now that Nintendo has that pool, not that they didn't have it before. And we saw that with multiple games. We got Yoshi and the Mysterious Books release date just in a trailer. We got the same thing with Rhythm Heaven Groove, but it wasn't even a trailer. It was just kind of just the game being listed on their eShop. But now we do have a proper trailer for Splatoon Raiders. Now we know coming out July 23rd, which makes me a little concerned. Not for Splatoon Raiders, but for the fact that we've seen more of this game now than we have of Rhythm Heaven, even though that one technically comes out sooner. And I will say this seems to be, I mean, clearly heavily built on top of Splatoon 3. It even includes the characters, the hosts that alternate between Splatoon games, Splatoon 3. And I could say this, for someone who, I might be one of the few, plays the Splatoon games for their campaigns, this actually looks pretty sweet to me. It does look like more Splatoon. I've seen people describe it as like an open zone, as like a roguelike. I don't know if we could really make that out from this trailer. As far as the gameplay goes, it definitely looks like Splatoon. I mean, for one, it looks like Salmon Run, which is a game mode inside Splatoon 3, more about hunting treasure. It is single-player focused, but on the website it says that you can also join up with 3 other players online or via local wireless. And this is where we get the release date of July 23rd. But the thing about Splatoon Raiders, and maybe in comparison to the other games, because at least Rhythm Heaven we saw in a Nintendo Direct, that Splatoon Raiders was shown off, I think just the logo of it, or maybe a teaser of it, on the Nintendo Today app. And the more and more, I do believe the rumor, perhaps, that we are still due for a general Direct in the summer after the release of these games. But now that we have these games slated for the rest of the summer, we have Yoshi and the Mysterious Book next month, and then now we have July 2nd Rhythm Heaven and July 23rd Splatoon Raiders, meaning that as far as the major Nintendo games developed by them, at least partially, Switch 2 exclusives that were announced via Directs, we're just waiting on the release date of Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave and Duskbloods. We know that Winds and Waves isn't coming out until 2027. So once we have release dates for those games, assuming that they even come out in like the summer, someone in the chat earlier was postulating a rumor that Fire Emblem might be delayed. I haven't heard anything about that. But I just want to ask you, first of all, as we're putting this timeline together, have you heard that Nate the Hate rumor, everything is said? How do you feel about it?
Nate the Hate, he said that, didn't he say something about like another reveal coming this week or something like that?
Oh, I'm not sure. I will say
I
though that
think I just saw that. Yeah.
oh, recently, what is it? Now we can know for sure. We'll know by next week. But that's the thing when it comes to like sources or leakers, if we do want to call them that, is that getting getting stuff correct doesn't necessarily mean that it's all going to be correct. However, the way these are lining up, I'm not saying this means Star Fox or this means Ocarina, but I can at least believe that because he's been 100% correct when it comes to dates at the very least. I can believe that we won't get a direct until the summer and they're just going to announce the dates of these. It kind of seemed last year and it seems novel to think back at it now. We're very greedy Nintendo fans whenever there isn't a game for 1 week. It's like, why are they going to announce this? What's happening? Nintendo's forgotten about us. Because looking back, last year was actually a pretty decent year as far as the Switch 2 goes. I liked a lot of those games. And we'll get to Tomodachi in a second. But the idea, it seemed the main thing that seems strange about that is that they were leaning really hard into the Nintendo Today app. And it seemed sort of like they were trying to not phase out directs entirely, but maybe just move people over to their own app. And companies try this a lot, and I don't know if it was successful. I don't know if the app is doing well. I can say that I definitely don't get my information from that app. Anything that's announced there will then also be talked about on TikTok, on Blue Sky, or Twitter. So it'll get around. There are breaking stories there, and that's where we first saw Splatoon Raiders, as it started with just a teaser. I don't think it's impossible that Fire Emblem and Duskbloods just get a random release date on one of these many Tuesdays they seem to be announcing things. But if they are also coming out in June or July, because June, as far as Nintendo products go, seems a little barren, that the next Direct would be in the summer somewhere. But maybe...
Yeah, I think like Nintendo, like they were one of the first companies to realize the value of owning their announcements. You know, traditionally before Nintendo Directs were even a thing, you know, video game developers, publishers, hardware manufacturers, they all relied on these kind of like trade shows or other showcases to kind of make those announcements and try to time those. And with development, you know, things get delayed. You have to shift things around all the time. I think Nintendo was one of the first ones to realize the value of owning their own Nintendo Direct branding, right? Mm-hmm. And I think like with the changes that have been happening on social media, I think like shifting over to the Nintendo Today app makes perfect sense because you know when Elon Musk took over Twitter, you know, then the changes to third-party connections into Twitter,
making everything worse for everyone all the time.
Yeah, it just got super limited. You have other companies who followed suit shortly after that. And so I think Nintendo at that time realized they can't own their own, you know, social media branding. And so because of that, that's where we saw Nintendo Today, right?
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Like people are going to see the news, even if it originates from Nintendo Today, you know, people are still going to post about it on Blue Sky, on Twitter, on wherever. And so that news will still get out. And like, I think Nintendo's one of the few companies that doesn't have to rely heavily on like paid influencer, paid activations, just because like the fans of Nintendo games are so you know, so deep into Nintendo already, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one of those brands that's like comparable to Disney.
It's sort of become like its own process online as well. I mean, that's what we're doing now. We're a cog in this of reacting to announcements and discussing them.
I think the only issue I really have is like, it's fine if they want to do it. I just don't understand their thought process behind the DRM attached to it. Like, it's not like anything they're posting there is like confidential. Like, they would also just post it to their YouTube. So I don't understand why there's so much DRM around the app. Like, why is it impossible to get a screen recording or a screenshot of that app?
Yeah, and also for this show, just if there was like a browser version, would be a great help.
Right.
I think like the main thing with that is that they're just trying to drive more and more people to download the app. They're trying to force people to use it. Because like if people could just grab screen recordings very easily, then it makes it less important to have that as a consumer.
Right. It is, yeah. Well, I will say this for like the timeline, or rather the ticking clock of this rumor slash leak, because that's what you always got to look for, just in case. It's like, okay, well, we'll know the answer by this point. I think it said that there would be a Star Fox announcement or release prior to whatever the next direct is. And of course, that gives us several months, maybe even before June. But June is rapidly approaching. And I think that will be the other shoe dropping. I saw other reports of people saying that, like, oh, Nintendo has said that they're purposefully sending out fake leaks to, like, suss out who's leaking information. And that automatically meant that Nate's information was incorrect. But one, I don't think that Nintendo would say that. Maybe they would leak that information, but I feel like they don't even really care about it that much. And two, I don't think that negates the information either, because if the main theme here is that, like, oh yeah, the games we don't know about, there's not going to be a direct, they're instead just going to be announced via YouTube videos, that's what we got. And it seems to be happening.
I think like Nintendo is a very secretive company. They do departmentalize information in a way where, like, even if you are someone who works at Nintendo, you might not necessarily know all of the projects or all of the things being worked on. It's not like, a school I don't know how to describe it. But like, information isn't always shared between departments and everything like that. So I think
Yes.
I think like this idea that like Nintendo's going out and like spreading misinformation, it could be true, but like I don't, I think like they don't. I think more and more Nintendo would be interested in stamping out leaks in general, and not,
Well, it's also
trying
just
to.
difficult if it's not primarily Nintendo. Like, it seems like the games we get information on early are not ones that are developed entirely by Nintendo. Like, sure, Nintendo can run a very tight ship and also expect that their co-contributors will run a tight ship, but that doesn't account for anyone who leaks for third-party companies, like a hypothetical Koei Tecmo or a Bandai Namco, or even like Game Freak. And it seems like that was most of the Nate the Hate track record when it came to the Switch 2, was just like stuff from Capcom that we didn't know ahead of time. It's like, okay, well, that involves the Switch 2, but Nintendo doesn't directly have their hands in it. So this all of a sudden burst of information featuring several like mainline Nintendo games, unless maybe a new Star Fox is being worked on by like Sega, because they did that before with F-Zero, and I wouldn't hate that. But opening up to the floor, do we have any suspicions? Do we think that we could maybe suss out release dates for Fire Emblem or Duskbloods? I guess where would you guys put them in the year?
Fire Emblem. I mean, I would have guessed it was the summer. I still think probably the summer, but I don't know. We are kind of creeping towards it. I mean, maybe it'll be August. I'm trying to remember when Three Houses came out. I think Three Houses came out in June.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how much that really matters. I mean, that was like,
of all these
ago.
games that don't have a release date, Fire Emblem was announced the latest, because now it's just, we're just waiting on Fire Emblem and Duskbloods. Duskbloods was shown off in that first Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, whereas Fortune's Weave was in that, I think, the end of the September Direct, and gauged its own announcements and excitement that way. Oh, I want to know that as well. The separation of the way that Smash fans in Japan react differently. Do they have a much higher opinion of Fire Emblem characters in Smash? Or do they share the same kind of "this is a lot of them" feeling?
I would say like they were pretty welcome in Japan in general. Yeah, I don't think it was as prevalent as the West, that kind of notion that there's too many.
I mean, my thing is like these are, having too many of them is only really an issue in Ultimate because they did Everyone Is Here. If my hypothetical roster, I'm sure we'll get into this someday, it's just like, oh, you just have Marth and Robin and then the new protagonist and do that for every game. But because, it's like, okay, we have to bring back all the characters, including Ike and Roy, and now Lucina and Robin, and we have to add Chrom because we wanted to work on Chrom. He's an Echo Fighter. Corrin was DLC. Let's do Byleth DLC for that. The argument that, like, oh, why does this cast have 8 characters as opposed to other series like Zelda is like, well, it's just kind of circumstantial that they happen to have multiple characters. Because I think the philosophy of a Fire Emblem character in Smash is that, like, oh, we'll just have the protagonist rep for each individual game. But when you're bringing them all back, it does get a little cluttered. But that's just the nature of bringing everyone is here. And honestly, that's why I don't mind the idea of cutting the roster a little bit. And again, like, it's fun to be able to have a Smash game to go back to is like, oh yeah, this one had this thing or this one had this thing. Ultimate being the one that had all of the characters. I don't suspect them doing that again. And I honestly don't even necessarily want them to do that again. But as we go day by day and week by week and have these announcements where we're now thoroughly in spring. The next major Nintendo release will be Yoshi and the Mysterious Book in May, meaning that we are about 4 weeks out from that happening. But the big thing this weekend, and I did my best to set it up, I'm going to start doing it as a weekly regular show on stream, not on the pod, of course, is the Nintendo Switch 1 release of Tomodachi Life Living the Dream. And let me ask you guys, have any of you had the opportunity to get your hands on this game quite yet?
Hell yeah, I've had the opportunity to get my hands on that game.
Damn right. Yeah. Well,
I mean, I've been kind of like, I just got into it because they just also released the 60 FPS patch of Yuka Replayly. So I just kind of like blasted through that. But I've been playing this for about like an hour or two, and it's fun. I'm having a good time with it.
Yeah, I mean, most of my time early on was setting up all the characters because there's a very specific, like, reality show elimination thing that I want to do. The only thing that bugged me because of that is I used to do that on the 3DS version, and what I would do is I would have Judgment Bay. I would write the different characters' names in the sand, and like, oh, whoever goes to this, they're, like, voting this person off. But that feature, to my understanding, isn't in Living the Dream. And I have no problem with it so far, but it does seem like there are multiple 3DS features that are missing from Living the Dream.
Yeah, although I will say, like, I think there are people online that are sort of like overstating like how much more content the 3DS version had. Because I mean, like, one thing I am disappointed about is that the Mii's having babies has been like overly simplified.
Okay.
But there are a lot of things that are kind of cool. I like the fact that your Mii's like interact with each other much more like vividly in this game.
Yeah.
Because in the old game, it was pretty limited. I mean, they'd have fights and stuff, but you don't really hear them have conversations very often. Not nearly as much as you do in this one. This one, one thing I really like, I'm pretty sure this wasn't in Tomodachi Life, the original one, because you can kind of like force Mii's to hang out with each other. You can sort of solve problems in different ways. Like, one thing I really like is that one of your Mii's is really sad. You can have like one of their friends cheer them up. I think like altogether I'm pretty happy with this game.
How deep into the game would you say you are?
Oh, shoot, I've probably played like 20 hours like already.
That's another thing I heard too, of people like trying to, it was the same thing with Animal Crossing, maybe it's a different story, of just blowing through the game as fast as possible and then getting upset. It's like, well, I've unlocked everything, what do I do now? It's like, well, that's not really what the game is for. You're kind of just meant to observe. It is a simulation game. But where I'm at right now in it, I'm excited. I don't think I had enough hours, even though I spent 6 hours playing it that first weekend. It was really just making all the characters. It is strange, I'll say, that, and this isn't a complaint, I just think it's more curious, that all the major Switch 1 games, like made by Nintendo, that came out since the release of the Switch 2, have had a Switch 2 version. The same thing with Legend ZA and Metroid Prime 4. It seemed like releasing Metroid Prime 4 on the Switch 1 was more just a formality because they said they would do it. But I feel like because I'm streaming it, obviously I can't take it out of the dock to then draw with the touchpad. The touchpad is a very good touch, but I feel like this game would greatly benefit from mouse controls. And I would never say that about any other game because I hate using the mouse controls. But that's the only thing I'm lacking right now. But it seems like there's a lot more customization outside of the characters when it comes to clothing, when it comes to pet, when it comes to houses. Again, I'm not very deep into it, but I'm excited to see.
I'm not really
more.
sure about clothing, really, but yeah, I mean, I mean, the houses, the exteriors, and stuff like that. I mean, it's funny. I've seen a lot of people draw parallels to like criticisms of like elements with that used to be considered, I think, part of the depth of the game have been kind of simplified.
Yeah.
Although I don't know if it's as real, if it's as really excuse me, as stark as it is in Tomodachi Life Living the Dream as it is in Animal Crossing New Horizons, at least personally.
Also, just like having them be able to walk around. Like there are additional features of like, oh, I want to see what's going on at the fountain, or even like I said, Judgment Bay. That like if you really wanted to, you could just physically make that. You could just draw on the sand and then see who walks over there. It would take a lot longer, but now that you can, you're right. Now that you can lift up the Miis and place them anywhere, those features that are missing that facilitated that, you can still brute force that. Or at least that is my theory. I haven't gotten into it yet. We'll see how that first episode goes tomorrow. Guest PushDustIn, have you gotten your hands on Tomodachi Life Living the Dream?
I've only played the demo that was on Switch. For me, like I was really into Miitopia when that like released on phones, but I never really got into Tomodachi Life. It's just a series that has kind of like escaped my attention.
Interesting.
But I would say like for Nintendo, like it really does make sense to still support the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 with these dual releases, especially for IPs that are not as major, because like any more sale, the more likely that people are able to pick up Tomodachi Life, the better it is for that series in general. And like it's not a premier franchise for Nintendo. Like Mii's have kind of fallen out of place on the Switch 2. You can see that their functionality is like really hidden behind menus now.
Yeah.
And so like I feel like they almost kind of released the Switch 2 version just to kind of say they have a Switch 2 version. Like the Switch 1 version was probably the one.
Well, there isn't a Switch 2 version.
Yeah,
okay,
it's weird.
Yeah.
Strange.
I do hope that the popularity of this game does make them change their tune about the Miis a little bit, because I can understand the idea of like wanting to move away from them with the Miis that like are built into the Mii Maker on the Switch, but with games like Miitopia and games like Tomodachi Life that they have their own in-depth like makeup feature, that was another part of the Nate the Hate rumors that like, oh, there might be something Nintendo Switch Sports, and that game apparently sold really well. But I hope if they do more for that, because the created characters look fine, but like all the NPC characters in that, it's not that they look ugly. It's not that they look like any other company could have made them. Like it could have been a THQ game on the Switch too. It just doesn't look like Nintendo's very specific style. And people love the Mii's, like still. And this game is doing, I don't know if it's doing well. I'm just like in the sense of virality and people talking about it, it does seem to be dominating the airwaves, and you can't necessarily say that about every game. I don't think every streamer is going to be streaming Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, although, fingers crossed, you never know. That there's so much I want to do with it. And it's not even that I mind it not having a Switch 2 version. It's just like this. So it's strange above all else. But it is factoring into the dynamic pricing. We didn't bring it up earlier, but Splatoon Raiders is digitally $50, and that is a fully Switch 2 exclusive game. And you
that is something that I'm like really shocked about, frankly. Like, just because, I mean, is it
Look like it. I'm not gonna lie.
is it gonna be that small? Like, is it gonna be like a 2-hour campaign? That's what I'm like thinking, because in many ways, this is sort of unprecedented, at least, in modern times. I mean, for years, Nintendo's been pretty strict about pretty much all their games having the same MSRP. And, a franchise as big as Splatoon, historically, like 5 years ago, that wouldn't seem like the kind of game they charge for that much less. We now have like, I mean, I don't doubt that Mario Kart World is a bigger game that costs more money than Splatoon Raiders. And that game is $80. This one's $50. But I don't know. It really seems like this game at any other point in history, or just like would just like 5 years ago, I would have guessed it sold for $60.
Yeah.
So I mean,
well,
I don't
it
know.
still might. It's
weird
just
to think about.
digital $50, so maybe they're gonna do what they said, where like the physical game is just a little bit more expensive than the digital to coincide
Yeah.
with, or rather respond
That
to
might be it.
the lack of digital sales. 'Cause
Well, yeah,
even, like,
already it is. I mean, the digital game's 50, the physical game's 60.
yes. And Rhythm Heaven Groove is going to be 40 digital. And that's interesting too, that like now
It's 40 physical too, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that is a Switch one.
But
game.
that's a Switch game.
Yeah. Well, that's what I wanted to ask too, is like, now that we have Tomodachi Life and we have a release date for Rhythm Heaven Groove, do we think that they're maybe not fully, but are we done with the Switch one? Because it seemed like the first year that a lot of what we were getting were like Switch 2 editions of Switch 1 games, and not so much the Switch 2 exclusives. But now that we're going to have a Splatoon, there's the next upcoming Pokemon generation is going to be Switch 2 exclusive, at least through that year. Do we think that they're going to announce any more in-house Nintendo games that are also on the Switch 1, or just on the Switch 1 in general? Or do we think they're done
Not
with
big
that now?
ones. Not big ones.
Okay.
No, I can only imagine it being like maybe remasters, ports, and that kind of stuff will have a Switch 2 edition as well. Personally, that's what I think.
We don't know about any more.
I mean, even
Like,
like
if we're going back to the Star Fox thing for a second, I'm still a strong believer that if we do get that Star Fox announcement within the next like week or so, like people are saying, it's gonna be like a Star Fox Zero, remaster with different controls, because that's sort of like what people expect in a way. Like I don't think people are expecting a brand new Star Fox game at this point in time, and if they are, I don't think that's gonna happen, unfortunately, unless it's way later down the road.
Because it needs to be a larger release, or because it needs to...
Because I think we need more time to settle with the idea that Star Fox is sort of back in the mainstream with this Mario movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this just released at the beginning of April, and even though it's like, oh, it's all over now, it's like Donkey Kong wasn't even like, it took them years before Donkey Kong got back like in a 3D mainline game.
Yeah. Well, that situation was
Mario
also
movie
strange
thing.
because it was initially built for the Switch 1 and then moved over to the Switch 2, and the game was done.
Yeah.
They were just waiting for the Switch 2 to release it. So I don't know if that's like a necessarily apt comparison, because if they wanted to release that game in 2023, they technically could have, if it was still like...
I think it would have been at least 24.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. But that was only like a year before the Switch 2. As far as... Mhm.
Do we know when they started switching it over to the Switch 2? Because, like, I mean, the story goes is that game can't really run on the Switch 1. I don't know how true that actually is, but it's like, I don't know, like all the cheese and the what's actually, I don't think it's cheese, all the dirt you're breaking, it takes up that's pretty demanding into resource wise. I mean, that's why I think I heard that, originally it was made with the Switch in mind, but it was just too much. It was just too much.
I wonder how many of these exclusive games were just being developed as Switch games, and then they changed gears and they're like, oh, this is the next thing, we should probably do this. Because I imagine Winds and Waves was made from the ground up with the Switch 2 in mind. Because
I think a lot of the games were, because I mean, I don't know. I mean, like all they would theoretically have to do, or maybe this. I mean, I've never worked in game development seriously, so like, I wouldn't know this is that realistic. But there were murmurs about a Nintendo Switch follow-up for years before the Switch 2.
Yes.
So I wouldn't be surprised if, internal kind of like discussion was like, okay, well, you can kind of design this game maybe a little bit more demanding than what the Switch entails, because we're probably going to, release a follow-up in the next few years, So, I mean, I think a lot of early projects are probably a little bit flexible, you know what I mean? In the sense that we're not really like, confining it to a specific console, at least not yet.
Yeah, it seemed like a Pokemon problem for a while, that the most regular complaints for the latest Pokemon games, like the traditional RPGs, are the limitations, the pop in, like the textures. But if you go back and look at like early builds of these games that were built on the computer, because that's just how games are built, they have a dev kit, but they build the game, and then not that, it's not linear like our guest said, but it's then the task to like get it working on the Switch, and like ZA specifically, the buildings used to jut out with windows, like fully modeled windows, and then like a month into that development, they all switched to flat textures, probably so they can get it running on the Switch 1. So I would think if there's any company to like build from the ground up for the Switch 2, it would be Pokemon, solely because, these developers aren't doom scrolling, but they've definitely heard the complaints, and there's a lot to that. I do, however, as we enter into these last couple phases, I have two important questions for our special guest here. But before we get into that, do you guys have any additional questions for PushDustIn?
No, nothing from my end.
All right. Well then, these are two segments that we've been doing semi-regularly. We prompt all of our guests as of late. If you are ready. First question here, if we're gonna throw it over here, is if you could just take a look at these three gentlemen right here. Is there anyone in particular that's really, really screaming out to you that you could back one of these teams? If it had to be your guy.
It depends on their evolutions, of course, but I forgot his name, but
here, if I can open up here, we have a guide of all the Smash Bros. Characters picked by our guest. If you had the opportunity to pick one video game character originated from a video game to put in the next Super Smash Bros. Video game, hypothetically, you could back one character in your corner. Who would that hypothetical character be?
Do I have to pick one of these, or can I
pick
just
any character, and then we'll put it on the we'll add it to the board.
I feel like is the question of what I want, or is the one that I think is more realistic?
What you want. If you could just pick one character.
Yeah, what you want.
And then when we get the roster, we'll go back through and see who gets to have a happy day that day.
So with the Smash ballot, the character that I submitted for it was 9V from the WarioWare series.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
Like I feel like 9V would have like such an interesting moveset potential and be able to pull out so many deep lore references to Nintendo's history. I think it would be really cool to have kind of like a meta character in Smash.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people talk. I'm sure you've heard this, because of the precipice of Source Gaming is just to actually like source the things that people are always saying when they talk about Balloon Fighter being a hypothetical character for Melee. It seems that like any of those ideas were just sort of absorbed into Villager. That Villager has all those references to, because the NES games exist within Animal Crossing that you could play as. Saving this, and then it should show up on the boards. It's still saving. Hold on. And now we have a... Did that work? I don't think it did. Okay, hold on. A complete... Okay, no, now I gotta sort... Okay, now I'm the one sourcing. Hold on. Let's see here. There we go. Perfect. Hit the button. There we go. Now we have the board. Multiple characters filling this up from a wide variety of places. I would love to do more, not like proper Smash speculation per se, I don't know, my character's not moving. All right, that's fine. But, I think what we're really waiting for is like a proper like start and go. Like, okay, this is when a game is announced. And I don't think it's going to be this year. If it was, it would have been perfect. It was right after the release of the video. But where we are right now, that's just the future of this show. But we do have another regular segment we've been doing every week. I mean, you talked about the way that Nintendo responds to social media, the different forums. You also name dropped Miitomo, which made me think back that, like, oh yeah, Nintendo sort of, like, in the Switch era really leaned into the Twitter and the YouTube of it all. But during the 3DS, the later stages of 3DS and Wii U, like there was Miiverse, they had that app that was competing with the likes of like Amino. It seemed at the time that there were a ton of apps that were built around fandoms being able to, like social media built into that. And I think I'll be honest. Like, it's one of those things where you only know what you have until it's gone. That people claim like, oh, we got to bring Miiverse back, and that would be fun to a certain degree. But I don't know if I would like check it as much as I do other social media. It'd be a fun side thing. Maybe that's the timeline we're in. Maybe all the terrible decisions of the other social media. Maybe Nintendo today is missing just that, being able to create your own Mii. However, Nintendo has gone through a lot of changes, a lot of different eras, the way they present it. What we've been doing every week is we have been watching a different Nintendo Direct in the order they were released. We are now at Nintendo Directs 10 or 9, I believe. This is from Nintendo of America, October 25th, 2012. Off the top of your head, Push, do you remember anything from October 2012 as far as Nintendo goes?
No, not in particular.
It was a long while ago. Well, to make you feel better, the only announcements we've really been getting are like new Super Mario Bros. 2 DLC and the 3D Pokédex app on the 3DS. Now, the 3DS just launched. That's context for this era. And we're about a month out from the Wii U being released. So let's see what's featured in this 30-minute Nintendo Direct.
Hi again, it's Reggie from Nintendo. While much of the world waits for Wii U, there are millions of portable gamers looking for new
They
adventures
keep doing this. Every
Nintendo
Direct we
3DS.
watch, it's like,
That's
forget
what
about the
this
Wii U
Nintendo
for a
Direct
second.
is
It's
all
coming
about.
out in a month.
Over the next few months, more than 24 Nintendo 3DS games are on the way.
Wow.
Yeah, it really is concerning when you think about it. Like, that was not a good sign.
Either at retail
or is this a different
or
office?
for purchase in the Nintendo eShop.
Is this, huh?
And some are digital only.
The office where he shot the
only
eye
place
lasers
you'll
from.
find
Do you
them
remember
is
that?
in the eShop.
Oh, I feel like that was someone
I know
else's
you
like
want
actual
details
house.
on all of this, and fortunately, we've got them.
Oh,
So please welcome
12
Nate
3DS
Bildorf to
games?
start us off with details on a game that hits retail shelves.
I mean, this
and
is
the
holiday
Nintendo
2012.
eShop
They also
in
like
just a matter of weeks.
we've got used to the
Paper
Switch
Mario,
era to like
Sticker
June,
Star.
February,
Nate?
September, but they really
Reggie,
just
I
were
don't wanna
doing these
alarm you, but
whenever.
there's been
Oh,
an
it's
accident.
Nate.
Details are sketchy at
Oh,
best, but
right,
one
and
thing's
Sticker
for
Star.
sure.
How could I
Stickers
forget?
have exploded all across the 3DS
Of course,
landscape.
the peak
Okay,
of
so this
gaming.
is Paper Mario's first appearance on a handheld.
Use
and it's
parental
tailored
controls
for
to
the
restrict
distinct
3D mode.
profile of the Nintendo 3DS.
That's the first thing
Not
they
only
show
does the art
us.
style really pop in 3D, but structurally it's more level-based, giving it the kind of playability you want in a portable game.
I don't think people wanted
And of
that.
course, it still retains the trademark.
Nobody wanted that.
Now with Mario, you'll collect stickers to solve puzzles and battle monsters. But you have no experience points, so finding power-ups is more important than ever.
Okay.
You'll do that by tracking down
I
hidden
see.
items,
They're hiding
fulfilling quests, and
EXP
beating
because it's a
bosses.
surprise.
The last of which
They
adds
want
more
to
pages to your
surprise us
sticker.
for when
Is
the
there
game
EXP
comes
in the
out.
game?
That allows you to
No,
collect
there
more
isn't.
stickers
Yeah,
Okay,
totally.
and more
well, that's what he
powerful
just
stickers.
said.
And mixing sticker-based gameplay with the traditional action
just like
battle
Smash Bros.
system of
Brawl.
the Paper Mario series delivers a new twist.
Never played
Every
this game.
sticker
It
is
makes
an
you want to
individual
play it.
attack.
What an
Once you
appetizing
use
game
one,
this looks
it's
like.
gone. So finding,
It doesn't
collecting,
even
and
look
buying stickers
bad,
becomes
like-
incredibly important.
The design, I mean,
That's
the art direction's okay.
Or more importantly,
It's the same
points.
example of like you never
Now, these
really
can be
know what
used
you
to
have
buy
until
more
it's
stickers,
gone. That
or
this
you
is
can plug them into
technically a
battle
correction from
This thing
the
is
Wii
absolutely
game,
fundamental.
Super
And it's up
Paper
to you.
Mario.
Nah,
that-
dude, Super Paper Mario is a masterpiece.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, people
unironically.
didn't like
Slots,
that
you'll
it
be able
didn't
to use
have
3
like
stickers
RPG
on that
battles, so
turn,
they're like,
which
all
can
right,
make
we're
the
going
difference
back to
between
that, but
victory
we're
and
also like doing something else.
Trust me.
I
You'll be
wonder
spending a
why
lot of
they
coins on the
they
battle
got
sticker.
away from
Not to
traditional
mention on
RPG
secret
battles.
doors
Is
and
maybe
other
because
powerful
like
stickers,
they were still
which means
releasing
every
Mario
battle
and
is a
Luigi
chance for a
games,
payday
and
that
they
will pay
viewed it
off.
That
as
might
like
have been it.
competition.
I mean, I actually don't know if it was like Miyamoto's idea because he's usually the scapegoat.
Yeah.
The enemies take on different paper
But I don't know.
forms. Mario has
Super Paper
side
Mario
effect.
wasn't an RPG,
When a
but
Goomba
like,
turns into a cone,
like it
for
was
example,
clearly
Mario must
still
use
like
strategy
Paper
to
Mario
avoid basic
E in
jumping.
the way
Yeah.
it was written,
That
and it's
Goomba
and
is
it's
sharp.
in its like sense of humor and
Facing
stuff
a
like
Koopa
that.
Troopa, jumping on it to initiate the battle will allow
I'm
you
interested
to
to
kick
see if
shell
a next like
fact-
hypothetical game
Now, there is
is
many
because
attacks as there are
technically the
stickers in
last
world,
one they
but you'll
worked
need to
on
figure out
was
the
the
right attack
Thousand
to
Year
use at
Door
the right
remake.
time.
If the next game is more
This
akin
is
to
a
that,
long
because I don't even I
adventure.
haven't
Throughout it,
played
you'll
it.
be
It's one of the few
collecting
Switch One games I
scraps
haven't
needed
played,
to
but it didn't
repair
seem
this
like
paper
Origami
world.
King was even that
and
bad.
real-world objects that can
Yeah,
transform.
people. I think People are
You'll
pretty
use this a
tepid
lot.
on like
Origami King
Color
is like-
Splash and Origami King.
By paperizing the world,
Origami
which
King
you
is
can
like
do at
my
any time.
favorite Mario.
The new perspective will
Mario,
show
I'm
you
not gonna
puzzles
lie.
to solve.
It's a
stickers
hot
waiting
take,
to
I
be
know, but
discovered.
it's personally my
So do it
favorite.
often.
I think if we got
As you make your
another,
way through
I know
the
it's going to sound
adventure, keep an eye out for the
blasphemous, but
sticker
if we got another Paper Mario game
It's a place
that
you
was
want to
just
come
like
back to and
Origami
visit.
King,
Very,
but
very
none of the ring battles, it was
Right,
just
so
like an
I've barely
overworld
scratched the surface
adventure
of this
game,
but believe me, you're
nobody
in for
would,
some
like,
serious-
less people would complain
Peeling the stickers off the environment just feels
if that's
right.
the next game we got.
Yeah.
The battle strategy is fun, satisfying, and deep.
He
And
looks
as
like
with
he's
all
having
Paper
fun.
Mario games, the humor is top notch.
I love this game.
Let's take a look.
Yeah, I wonder how much they did say like 12 handheld titles.
Yeah, I think it really feels like Nintendo kind of shoehorned themselves in with Paper Mario. They're like, oh, it has to be, paper or craft based for the series. Like, I feel like that's why they went with like the origami direction for the Origami King
Yeah.
stickers. Or,
The
I
initial.
think like they're just like, yeah. I think that's why they kind of moved away from the RPG elements a little bit, because they're like, oh, this is a unique crafting.
Yeah, they
game
wanted to
with
sell the
Mario.
gimmick. Well, like the initial idea of the first Paper Mario was just it was supposed to be a direct sequel to Super Mario RPG, right? So the fact that like they looked like it was a storybook was sort of secondary. And then there were power-ups in the Thousand-Year Door that require you folding in and of itself, but it wasn't. I guess that was maybe like.
The curse is you're cursed. Whenever
Gotcha.
you press the B button, you turn into a little roll.
Oh yeah, all that stuff. They're just showing us.
For the song.
They're showing us a sizzle reel of the footage they just showed us, but now with music. I'm glad the music's there. Yeah, we saw this. I remember this. This is from the trailer we just saw.
Man, they really knew how to do trailers back then.
When does this game come out in North America?
I think it was like November 2012.
Yeah, that would have been pretty
Maybe
soon.
December.
Let's see.
I think it was December actually. But yeah, you see a boss like this, which is just like a Goomba piece of paper, and you think like, yeah, remember when like remember Cortez? Remember
Whoa,
Cortez?
realistic goat. You got the goat. Screenshot that now.
Like humor.
November 11th, 2012. So it's like 2 weeks out. So like, what is the issue with it? Just the
there's
lack of
something about-
companions?
There's something about the way this looks that it's ugly. I don't know what it is. There's an ugliness to this, and not in a.
I think one of my least favorite things about the sticker star is the fact that like the areas are a lot more generic. The characters are a lot less memorable.
Right.
Because I don't know, when you think about this is like right now he's just in Jungle World.
Yeah.
And like the jungle people are like little shy guys wearing jungle outfits. But you think about, I don't know, like Creepy Steeple, like the characters where these like weird goths, like scarecrow, not scarecrow people, scarecrow people that were like
Let's take a quick look
moody
at a
all the
few
time.
titles.
Yeah, well,
I
people
don't know, they
remember
really
about the
gave
games
Professor
of the
Layton
original
and the Miracle
characters.
Mask, which hit
Yeah,
store
no,
shelves
absolutely.
and the
Apparently,
geek list
Rockhawk was
this Sunday.
intended, or they.
Even if you've never played a Professor
Oh,
Layton
Professor
game
Layton!
before,
Ooh, Professor
you're going
Layton.
to want to consider
How
this.
far we've fallen.
As
This is so
any
funny, it's
Professor
going from
Layton
Paper
fan
Mario
knows,
to
these
Professor
games
Layton.
always combine logic puzzles with top-notch production values.
This is just.
The game doesn't look like this
Grossing
anymore.
and
Because of what
mind-bending
happened.
mysteries.
Yeah, this looks
This
cool and all.
fifth
I just wish it was
installment in
AI.
the series starts when Professor
I
Layton
know, right?
receives a cryptic letter from a high school friend. It tells him about the villainous masked gentleman. The investigation takes a
This is
turn
just
into
like Case
Layton's
and Ace
past.
Attorney.
Just like Bale in
and moves you
Wonderworld.
back to the earliest point in the series.
Like a stupid high school
Layton's high
haircut.
school days. That makes this the perfect game
That
to
was-
start
that's
with
what made
if
him the
you've
man
never
he is
played
today.
before. And
The experiences
longtime
he
fans
suffered.
will love the backstory.
He looks like the bug
Solve
gym leader from
puzzles
Unova.
in order to
Oh,
solve a
Berg?
mystery of the masked
Yeah, I
gentleman
think Berg.
and the miracle mask.
The Masked Gentleman.
And in this Professor Layton game, you'll see more puzzles than ever before, including new twists.
This wasn't
on
the
familiar
last
visualization,
one before
logic,
the
and
company
slide
folded,
puzzles,
right? Because like they made a
along
couple
with a
3DS
handful of
ones, I
new
think.
I
puzzle
think
types
it was
thrown
the
in.
last.
Oh,
one,
maybe it
right?
was.
Wasn't yours
In
the
Well-
addition
last
to
one?
all the puzzles found in the story mode,
Let's see.
Professor Layton and the Miracle
Professor Layton
Mask
games.
also features 365
I know there's a bunch of spin-offs, like
downloadable
the
puzzles. One for
Catrolina
every
or
day of the
something?
year at no extra charge.
The Latent series.
Visit the game's official site for more information.
Well, I wonder if I'm on the
You
site
can
right
get
now.
these free puzzles from your home wireless connection or by
Okay,
downloading
mobile.
automatically
I think
at
some
one
of these
the
are like
more
iPhone
than
games.
30,000 Nintendo
Yeah,
games
iOS,
I know they had a few
Android.
across the
iPhone
U.S.
specific games.
That includes
Leighton Road
Starbucks,
Mystery Room
Simon
is
Malls,
a great one.
and Marriott hotels.
And
Nintendo
wait,
Zone
what did he
will
just
also
say?
let you access
You said Marriott
Download
hotels.
the you can
browse the
download
internet
them from
or play
Marriott
games
hotels.
online.
Is he saying like, hey, if you don't
So
have
whether you're
Wi-Fi,
going out for coffee,
you can find a
You
go into
go
your
to your
local
Starbucks,
McDonald's?
going
Yeah.
Go to your
Vacation.
Starbucks. Go
Yeah,
to your
sure to bring
Barnes
your
and
Nintendo
Noble.
3DS with
This
you
was like a thing
to
for the
get
3DS. I
more Professor
remember
Layton
vividly
puzzles.
going to a McDonald's to
I'd like
download
to
like
introduce
Animal
you to
Crossing
three games
DLC.
with
That
strong
transition was
appeals
awesome.
to
I love
certain
that.
kinds of gamers. Starting with a type of puzzle game that's been popular for more than a
Professor
century.
Layton
Paper
7.
Mario.
Crosswords
Oh.
Plus, there are more than 1,000 professionally created puzzles, and more will keep coming at no
Wow,
extra cost.
there's a lot of puzzles for this
That's
first
because
part.
additional crossword puzzles can also be downloaded.
This is the
for
one they're
free
being precious
via
about the
Spot
gameplay?
Pass, either at home or at
Please
nationwide
visit
Wait, how much
Crossword Plus.
gameplay can you really show with
Art
crosswords?
Academy.
Okay,
Lessons for
now we're-
Everyone is the
they
next
wasted a lot of time on
3DS
Paper
title
Mario,
to
now we're really
feature
gonna speed through
downloadable
these.
content. And while it certainly doesn't fit the typical definition of video game,
Oh.
it's got a lot to
Don't
offer
say
anyone
that,
you
man.
know who's interested in art, or anyone like me who would like to get a little bit better at drawing. But it's not just a drawing.
I hope Reggie got a little better at drawing.
Step-by-step
Yeah, that's why he
lessons
retired.
that
Van Gogh be in the next
explore
Smash
art
Bros?
theory
Personally,
and the
I think
fundamentals
yes.
of sketching
Who, Vince?
and painting, including
Is that his
real-world
name,
art
Vince?
techniques.
Yeah, he's
using
a
materials
assist
such as
trophy and a
paints,
costume.
Pastels, and
I've
colored
never
pencils.
played Art Academy,
You can
so
even
I don't
create
know.
your
I
own
just know him
lessons
from
and
Smash
share them
Bros.
with your
Like
friends,
most Nintendo
along
characters
with
I
your
know.
own artistic creations. The game is available
Whoa, he drew
now
that?
both in stores and on Nintendo eShop. And after you've purchased it, you'll be able to purchase additional packs
If
to
he made
supplement
this,
the 32 included
is this
in the
AI
game.
art?
Oh,
Two packs
because
are
it was made by
already
I see.
available,
He's the first
and we're
AI
currently
artist.
working on 10 new lessons that will be released in the
I
coming
played
months.
Portal 2 the other day on
keep in
stream
mind,
because
if you're a
that's
Club
15th
Nintendo
year
member
anniversary
and download
the
any of
other
these
day. And that's
titles
my
from
favorite
the
game of
eShop,
all time.
that
And I did
means
shudder a
Crosswords
little bit like a
Plus,
wounded dog
Art
when
Academy
they said
lessons for
you
everyone,
have to take down the
Professor
AI.
Layton and the Miracle Mask,
Miracle
or
Mask.
Paper Mario Sticker Star.
Okay.
You'll be eligible for a special Club Nintendo reward,
Oh?
Donkey Kong Original Edition.
Oh, Club
Oh.
Nintendo.
It's a
I
free
missed that.
download.
Oh,
of
I
the
remember this.
original
I want the
edition
Ultra
of
Hand.
This I
Donkey Kong,
remember.
including the famous Pie Factory level. It's not for sale, and it won't be available anywhere else.
Okay.
See Nintendo.com for more details on
So on the 3D,
eligibility
I guess on the
and
3DS
all
it would
of
have
the
to be.
benefits.
I think this was
of
kind of
Club
like a big
Nintendo.
deal.
Finally, in this section
He's
is
making
a
it feel
different
like it.
kind of game for a different kind of audience. Style-savvy trendsetters.
All right.
You
Oh,
may think of
hell
this as
yeah.
the perfect game for a friend.
And by different audience, he
sibling,
meant
or
girls.
Yeah, he
The
said
girl
At
game.
Yeah,
first
perfect
blush,
game
it
for a
seems
friend
very
or
distinct
sibling.
From the majority of video games.
Yeah, what if I want to play these
The
games?
management, collection, and puzzle elements of this
Now
fashion
this
world are
is
deep
gaming.
and varied.
I mean, this is just what Tomodachi
Who
Life
knows?
is.
Maybe.
Game in front.
Just
I always
maybe,
found it interesting
you'll
how
find
this
it
game
to be a guilty
specifically was
pleasure.
like repped in Smash Bros.
Between running your
Well,
store,
Style Savvy was like a
choosing
pretty
your
long-running
inventory,
series. I
and
think it started on the
satisfying your
DS.
customers, there's a high demand on focus and
I
strategy.
wonder what the last Style Savvy game
It
was. I'm
also
sure there's one on the
features
Switch.
Wasn't there one for
online
Switch?
connectivity
Yeah,
Like,
that
wasn't there
keeps
just
the
one for
play
Switch not
fresh
too long ago?
and
Style
engaging.
Savvy.
In fact, be sure to give 2 free playable demos a try on the eShop.
2.
The first, Fashion
There
Contest
were two.
demo.
Wow.
Oh,
is
they have
available
like their
now.
own like red and blue
And
version.
the second, Shopping Spree, will be available
Damn.
November 1st. If
It probably
style-savvy
sold
trendsetters
crazy.
works outside
Well,
the
no, there's
mainstream,
4.
probably
Okay, there's
did.
4,
let's
and
shift
the
to
last one was
something
Style
that's
Savvy's
always been at the
Styling
heart
Star on the
of mainstream
3DS.
appeal.
Is that the one we just
Really? I
saw?
thought there was one on the Switch.
New Super
What
Mario
came out in,
Brothers 2
in
launched August,
2017?
and we've already
Like
released
late
downloadable
2017.
content to expand the fun.
Let me look into this.
And now there's even more. The new course packs offer exciting
While a
ways
direct
to
style
play
is
from
on
Super
all
Mario
skill
Bros. 2
levels.
courses, all
Oh,
right.
they just made,
including a
okay.
global
The
leaderboard
developers made a
on the
different
official
game that's
New
the
Super
same
Mario
game just
Brothers 2
without
website.
Nintendo involved.
Your top score will be passively transmitted to other owners in Street Pass mode.
Oh,
And when you flip open your own
yeah,
figure,
Fashion
love-
Dreamer.
you'll find scores
I don't
from
love how
other
it's
players.
just one long shot
of
of
course,
Reggie looking at
I
it.
hope they
gonna
do
wanna
the
be,
little
like,
cube
he's looking for a
transition
Each of
again
the
where
2
you
new
wipe.
Coin
They
Rush
should do
course
all the
packs
default
They should do
transitions.
like one of those whoosh transitions.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like the
gold
equals
mushroom
that goes.
pack is just what the name suggests.
They should like
Levels
zoom in
filled
like
with
110% every
See,
single
that's what they were
sentence.
missing in the
This pack
2012
makes it
direction.
easier
They need
for
more
you to up your
YouTubers.
coin count quickly.
If Ian and Anthony were
Challenge
presenting
Pack
this, it'd be a
B
different
will
story.
challenge you to up your
When
score
they should
and
have him
share
like
with
make a mistake and then it plays the
These
Roblox
courses also
sound
rate high
effect.
And it goes
on
fail,
playability.
epic
whenever-
fail.
You'll want to test yourself.
Whenever he like shows
over
the
and
game,
over
it like does that like
At
wow
Comic-Con
sound
in
effect.
New York
Oh,
a few
yeah.
weeks ago, people got a first-hand experience of trying to gather as much
I think the
gold
last
as
4
possible
directs we've watched
in a
have
limited
included
time,
footage from
which
New
is
Super
what
Mario
these
Bros.
new
2.
challenges are all about.
They were like they were proud of this game.
Well, it's because they
I love
released
that they're not
DLC
even
like a
talking
week
about
after
we
the
are in
game
that
came
House
out.
team
I mentioned this
recorded
last
his
time, but we
own
are in that
speed run,
revisionist
which
era
we're
right
going to
now, where
post
it's
on our
like people are
Facebook
kind of like
page
switching
later
up on
today.
this game. Which I'm glad about.
Yeah.
Because
See if
these
you can
DLC
top your
courses are
score.
very fun. These are
Well, see,
very
that's
fun.
the thing is that
Downloadable
like
course packs are
the game
available for
isn't
purchase
bad
from
in a
within
bubble.
the
Like there's
new
nothing
Super Mario
structurally
Brothers
bad
2
about it. It just isn't
in-game
really
shop
inventive
today.
in an
As you
era
can
where
It's just not what people wanted at the time.
yeah,
I
it
think
was
that's
the
main
fourth
part. Now
new
more
Super
accessible
Mario
than
Bros. Or I guess
Third,
the
third.
third at the time.
More content is available.
And
The
it, like-
fourth one came out 4 months later.
You'll find
Yeah.
full downloads of games that previously were available.
I
only
personally
as
skipped
package
it
games.
like when it
Super
released
Mario
because I was like,
3D Land,
this is too
The
much
Legend of
Mario for
Zelda
me.
Yeah, I don't know if
Ocarina
anyone would
of
blame
Time.
you. And again, like
I
3D
played a little
Land
bit of it,
too.
put it
Star Fox
down,
64
and then like
3D,
finished it like a
and
year
Mario
later.
Kart 7. The eShop is also home to virtual console games featuring
Like
an
Donkey
They're
Kong.
really
selection
pushing the
of Game
early
Boy
days
and
of
NES
eShop.
titles,
Yeah.
as well
people
as
on
the
it.
3D Classic series that sees legacy games remastered
Ooh, 3D
in full
Classics.
3D. And finally, there's a
they
large
didn't
library of digital
end up
games
doing
that
a lot-
aren't
a whole
available
lot of those, right?
anywhere else.
They did like 5
Like,
of
there's
them,
only-
and only
yeah.
one of them
This
is really
last
worth
group,
playing.
I wonder which one we're on
Let's
now.
look at a couple and start with Crash Mode.
Oh.
It's the sequel to Push Mode.
Oh, hell
a
yeah.
game that has one
His
of the
dangerous
highest
cousin.
Metacritic
I am
scores
still
of any Nintendo
Still
3DS
so
title,
upset
packaged
that
or
Push
digital.
Mode never made the jump to Switch.
It's
That is
strange.
such
is Gravity.
a shame. It's
There
such
Yeah.
a
are new play
devastation.
mechanics.
Well, like,
and
what's the
gadgets like
intelligent
floating
systems? What
blocks,
else are they known
doors,
for?
and move switches.
They do Fire
The
Emblem, they
floating
do
blocks defy gravity
WarioWare.
by suspending in air, even if
They
there are
work on a
blocks
lot of
stacked
different
on
stuff. Like
Yeah.
they, back in
New move switches
NES days,
will move blocks
they did
in a single
the
direction when
the
they're
dev
stepped
kits.
on. So
Oh,
make
wow.
sure you know in
Wow.
advance.
Well,
where
then I
you
guess
want them.
yeah, we've got multiple WarioWare,
You'll
multiple
push,
Fire
pull, and
Emblem on the
slide each
Switch.
of them
You gotta get
in
Push
order
Mode in
to
there
climb to
somewhere,
the
and
top.
his friend
It's
Crash
kinda
Mode.
Be careful where
crazy.
those blocks
Like we got Box Boy, we got
Unsupported
they
ones
somehow
will
managed to
come
make
crashing
Scribble
down.
Knots work on a
to
Switch.
help.
Like,
Not
you
for
don't
me,
need
rotate
to-
but-
the camera view while playing
Oh.
to thoroughly
I got the
view
Scribble
each
Knot
puzzle from
Showdown
every
in
angle.
the early
Oh, well,
stages
yeah,
of
you
the
got the
Switch.
bad
Really comes
one.
into play.
Okay, I didn't know there was another one. That one
Crash
just
Mode
straight
Yeah,
up
you gotta
didn't
get the
work.
Mega Pack. That's the one
Okay,
you
my
gotta get.
mistake.
Even when they're solved, the action doesn't have to end. That's because of the enhanced puzzle creation and puzzle sharing features that let you create
Yeah, see, like
your
if they
own
just, yeah,
challenges
you're right. If they just,
via
not even a
QR
port,
code
but just
pattern.
like, oh, the
Crash Mode will
old
be available
puzzles,
starting
and then also you
November
can make your,
22nd,
even if they just did a
only
game where like,
through
oh,
the
you can
Nintendo
make your
eShop.
own puzzles and play other
In
people's. Yeah, that
Fluidity
transition.
Spin Cycle, your Nintendo 3DS itself is part of
Just
the game.
this is like a cool math game.
Tilt, turn, and even
Well, no, this was
completely
originally a
rotate it
WiiWare game,
360
and then
degrees
this is the sequel to the WiiWare
maneuver
game.
a puddle of water named Eddie.
It looks
through a
so much like a
maze-like
Flash
magical
game, like a browser game.
Oh, it does.
You'll
I'm
have
not.
to
I'm not
master
Yeah.
all the
arguing
states of
that.
water,
It is.
from
It actually
liquid to
is a
block of ice
series
It's a
or
now
Nintendo
steam cloud
franchise.
of 2
to
games.
solve gravity-defying puzzles and defeat goop monsters.
Oh, cool monsters.
For example, gather a pool of
This is
magic
just like that
goop
Mario
monsters,
Galaxy
control
boss.
it as you try to jump chasms, flow through pumps, activate
The
switches,
3DS is
Did World of
really
Doom
heating
2
up.
ever
squirt it
release?
into a huge
Again,
bucket
the
to
Wii
weigh
U
it down.
comes out in a month in
Fluidity
North
Spin
America.
Cycle features an all-new storybook setting that spans the
I guess
ages,
most of that was shown off
from
at
a lost
E3, but
world
it's weird
full
that
of
they haven't even like
dinosaurs to
followed
the
up on
modern
it at
world
all.
and beyond.
I think that's what we're gonna
Levels
get
are
in the
designed
early
to be
stages of
enjoyed
the
over
directs.
and
Is
over,
that
while
the
racing
major
clock
announcements don't
collect
really
all
happen
of
at
the
them
water
as much as they
pickups,
do at the
hidden puzzle
E3s.
pieces, and
Yeah,
rescue
you might be right because I was like talking shit
spirits
earlier,
within
but there's a
you.
good chance I think that they didn't really
Some areas will
they didn't
require
really
moving
expect the
and
direct
placing
or they
United
Or they didn't really think of the
States
Direct as like the big news place as much as like back then.
Yeah.
It maybe I don't think that really got picked up that way until like 2013 or 2014.
December 27th.
Because I didn't watch the Directs until I think like Smash 4 was first shown off.
Yeah.
Fans.
All right, this
no
is
more
like
heroes.
that one airplane game.
You don't have to wait for this game. It's available today from the Nintendo
And that's
eShop.
why I think it's the
And
Direct.
while
It's like,
you're
okay,
there,
these things are happening
enjoy a
this
brand
week. We
new
need to get this
trailer
out to you
for
quickly.
Liberation Maiden.
Yeah, that game.
Also
As
due
opposed to like
this year
announcing them
are
ahead
the
of
second
time.
two parts of the trilogy. Arrow Porter from Yute Saito, followed by Crimson Shroud from Yatsumi Matsuno. And let me mention 3 more eShop games you're going to want to check out. 2 are from Nicholas, the developer of Cave Story.
Oh.
Available today, there's the beautiful Night Sky. Then
Cave Story is another one where like that'd be a fun
is Ika-chan,
indie character quote,
which takes
just
you
to
on an
represent in
undersea
Smash as like a
adventure
Mii
that features
costume.
both
If
friendly
I
and
like the
unfriendly
idea of the
waters
Mii costumes being
and
like the
frequent
indie
earthquakes.
slot to represent all of them.
And if you loved Mutant Muds from Renegade Kid, get ready.
Oh,
Because
this
there
is
are
a good one.
20
Mutant Muds is
free
a
bonus levels
fantastic
coming your
game.
way. In fact,
I have not
they're
heard about
also
Mutant
available
Muds in
today.
so long.
Crashmo
they
and
did a
Fluidity
Switch
Spin
release.
Cycle. And
I did,
all the
yes,
rest
I have
are
that.
just
It's a
part of the
very
exciting
fun
lineup of
game.
content
I think it's
on
better
the
on the
way
3DS
to
though,
the
because it
Nintendo
plays with the
eShop
3D a lot
over
better.
the next coming weeks. Let's take a look.
Yeah,
Where's
because
It does the foreground background thing, yeah.
Is that? Oh no, we're getting a sizzle reel. Okay, no, this is still Crash Mode.
Oh, nice. It's the same exact footage we just saw.
Right, but now we get the Crash Mode song. What makes it Crash Mode?
Because now you're pulling things apart.
He crashes into things.
Oh, holy shit! I can play it on the go?
Arrow Porter. I love it.
Oh, they got Wario Lands. And
The
he's
best
pink in this
Wario
one.
Land 2 game.
no, Wario Land 3 is the best one.
This one
I
also,
agree.
like, I'm sure it's a good indie game. This one also strikes me as a... It's kind of funny that they still do this now, where, like, they take time in directs and whatnot. Maybe not as often with, like, Super Nintendo or NES games, where they'll be like, yeah, this game is coming to Nintendo Switch Online.
Well, I think it was funny when they did that with Console Archive. Like, the snowboarding game looked fun, but then it's like, why do we care about Ninja Gaiden 2? I'm pretty sure there's like 3 different ways we can play Ninja Gaiden 2 right now.
Oh, it's, what's it called? Zumba? Zoom? It's one of those. Of course. Man, they were really... We're in a lull period right now. But, like, it makes sense that they would announce it at the
At
E3,
E3, I
but again,
casually mentioned that this next title would be coming to the Americas, and that little comment created quite a stir. I'm talking about Fire Emblem,
Okay.
which
Mother
you'll have
3.
the chance to experience
Come on,
in just a
Reggie.
few more months. Here's
Give
Rich
us Mother
Antower with
3.
details.
There he is, Fire Emblem.
Awakening, you'll join Crom, brother to Illicit
Well, this is
Empress
like the
and
big
commander
one,
of
right?
its
This is what
forces,
got a bunch of
in a
people into
fantasy
Fire
world
Emblem.
teetering on the brink of
And they
war.
can't pay hard
it's
to get
definitely
it.
It's
like
your duty to guide
Fire
the
Emblem
Illicit's
second
finest.
win.
Knights,
Yeah.
mages,
Well, that's why I said
archers,
earlier,
I don't know,
like,
against
every
the
I don't know
Smash
if he
game
looked
just
like
have
that in
Marth
years.
and Robin and
But
then a
what
new
sets Fire
protagonist.
Emblem
Because Marth
apart
and Robin are
is
sort
that
of like
these
those...
soldiers are all unique characters.
You
with
can't just do
unique
Marth and
abilities.
Lucina. That's
You
not
mean-
as
you
If
fun.
one
mean
falls
Roy.
on the battlefield, you've lost that
Do
ally
you need
forever.
Roy?
This
No,
is a
you
team
said
of
Marth
distinct
and Rob.
individuals.
Oh,
each
Marth
with
and
a
Robin.
backstory, and relationships
I thought you
play a
said
key role in
Rob.
the
I'm
plot.
like,
Yeah.
you mean
Well,
Roy?
obviously we
Lead
need
your
Rob in
team
the
through
game.
battles across maps.
Oh,
that's
by
fine.
Roy you
It's
meant
over.
Koopa Kid Roy. I see.
Some characters will join you quickly.
Yes, Roy
While others
is
may
a
need
given.
more
But
persuasion.
I remember,
Right.
I remember when like
Each
Smash
character
4
earns
first came out. I heard a lot of people arguing whether they would bring back Roy. They're like, no, he couldn't because there's a
It's up to
Bowser
you to guide their
Jr.
moves on the
alternate
battlefield,
costume
choose their
for
weapons,
Roy.
and
Yeah.
direct
But it's not the Fire Emblem Roy, and you can't have
But
two
as I
Roys in
said,
one game.
relationships
People
are
said the
key.
same thing for Ryu
The characters can
Hayabusa
support one
from
another
Ninja
on
Gaiden.
the
That ended up
battlefield.
not being
As
true,
their
but
relationships grow, you'll learn more about their lives, enhance their
Yeah, I don't think
bonds,
they're gonna
and
let
marry them.
names of a character
And when two
prohibit them
characters
from
share a bond,
bringing
Yeah.
a
you
character
partner
back.
them on
well,
the
there were a lot of
I was
rules
pretty
like
convinced so when I was
the more
13.
quickly they'll
there
fight
was a lot of
together.
rules set in place by the
They
community
learn
just so we
enemies
wouldn't go
hating each other in
insane.
attack.
That
And
is
new to
part
the
of like why I
series
don't
is the
want an
ability to
Ultimate
create your
Deluxe. Like
own
it's like, oh, it's more
customizable
Ultimate,
avatar who will
but
join
you
the
can have
battle
more
alongside
characters. It's
prominent
like, yeah, but
soldiers.
Ultimate like has all these
Fire
assist
Emblem Awakening
trophies
really comes alive
that
on
would
Nintendo
hypothetically
3DS,
maybe
with all new
disqualify
character designs,
perhaps. Even though
new
like, you know, if they
graphical look,
really wanted
more
to,
voice acting and
they could just
cutscenes,
have
and
Waluigi
of
be a
course, a
character.
richly
Like these are
detailed
rules
world
set in
in
place
full
by
3D.
them, and they're not even really
With Fire
strict
Emblem
rules.
Awakening, you'll be able to extend the
Like they have
using downloadable
Link on the
maps.
Spirit
It will add
Tracks
new stories,
stage
challenges,
disappear
and
if
new
you have Link.
opportunities to an
Yeah,
all-new
and
world.
Right. I like
The,
that.
yeah, the Knuckles
Let's take a
assist
quick look.
trophy can't spawn on Green Hill.
Yeah.
Alucard can't spawn on the Wii Fit stage because it's a giant mirror. Like, they definitely could do that. And I think the Moon
I still
assist
think
trophy
the
doesn't
cutscenes
spawn
in
on.
this game look so good.
It's sort
Like
of
they
a,
really.
a middle
so
point
good.
where the not that the art style changed, but I do think like the GBA ones are really charming because it's more that like pixelated art style, and this still sort of has it. But I haven't played a recent one. I haven't properly played one. But if I'm committing to playing all the Switch games, then, or the Switch 2 games, then I gotta lock into Fortune's Weave.
In some place that was area. I count that as my Fire Emblem game. That's my Fire Emblem.
Dude, I had a friend when I was a kid, and I had him on one of the early weekend streams, like the launch weekend. And I was like, oh, you know, like we used to play Brawl together as kids, because like he was like only a little bit older, 69. He was only like a little bit older. And I was like, oh yeah, you know, we saw Ike and Marth, and we thought they were cool. And he was like, no, I know who these characters were. Which shocked me because I didn't know anyone, much less a child. Oh, it's Lucina. Wait a minute, is that Marth?
How can you tell it's Lucina? They're wearing a mask.
Oh, sorry, that's Joker.
Yeah, there you go.
Browser! Princess Bubblegum!
Classics. I'm so excited. I hope that AI dies out before this next Smash cycle, but I'm so excited to see it again. Man, I'm feeling it all over again.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm so glad I'm not part of Smash speculation with AI in the mix.
Yeah.
Because like I remember spending so much time like trying to debunk like images and videos.
There's another
like looking at like the shadows and like looking at like how the boxes were set up and everything like that.
And here are the details.
It would just be impossible nowadays.
Yeah.
We're never gonna get another
Nintendo Direct videos
Grinch
out of
leak,
Japan.
and that's
You probably
really
already know
upsetting.
Well, that was just like so many different factors lining up. But that one I did believe sort of, but the other ones I didn't believe as much. I just thought they were really fun. I used to think image leaks were really fun.
And one major change to start you right off.
It is ironic
You are
that
just a villager.
it was
You
the
will be the
Illumination
mayor of
Grinch
the
leak,
town.
and then we ended up
As
with
the mayor,
Illumination.
Yeah, if
and
they want to make
decisions to make.
a big Smash
Decisions
Bros.
that affect your
crossover,
town
they have
allow you to
Illumination
mold it the way
Grinch,
you want
Illumination
to,
Donkey Kong,
and give
Illumination
you a much
Yoshi.
greater degree of customization. You can
This game
decide what
isn't out
landmarks
yet, I
should
don't
be
think.
built,
Let me see.
encourage new shops to open, and even decide the hours of the local merchants so you can better match your lifestyle and when you play. This new element of the
I don't
game
care what anyone
is
says.
huge.
I still think this
It
is
adds
the
a
best
whole new
one.
facet to your role in your town. Plus, it feels
feel like
great
people
to
do
New
see
say
this
that.
Horizons.
mayoral
I have too many like Death by
Beyond
a
being
Thousand
the
Suns
mayor and making the
with,
big
New
decisions,
Horizons.
you still have all the
I
little
don't have
details
that
to
with this
decide
one.
on
Oh,
as
this
well,
is weird. It
including
comes
the
out
crucial
June
decision of what pants to
2013.
wear. You can now customize your outfits head
That's
to
a
toe,
weird-
including pants, shoes.
It
and
does
even
come out in
socks.
they're
November
showing
in
off those
Japan,
custom
though,
looks allow for
so
much
maybe it
greater
just took a while for it
detail.
to be
And you can convert your
localized.
custom designs into QR codes to exchange with
I think
other
for me,
players.
like with New
Of course,
Horizons,
you'll
like
also decorate your
I got
house, and
less
there are many new
into the
furniture
collecting
pieces to
aspect,
choose from,
like with
as
the
well as new
3DS
items you can
and
hang on the
the
wall.
DS versions. I was
Plus,
like super
custom
into trying to
designs can
get
also
all
be
of the
used to
furniture,
refurbish
all of
furniture
the
you already have
different
at the local
stuff.
recycling shop. So overall,
But with New
customization
Horizons, I
has
just
been
didn't
great
feel
and
that need.
enhanced. And this
Yeah,
edition
I
of
get
Animal
that.
Crossing
I
features
kind
a
of
new
felt the
island,
same way too.
a tropical place you can venture to when you want to enjoy the sun. You can try to win medals there in new activities, or go for a swim, another new feature of the game.
I want to see the
There's
sizzle reel of the same
way
footage
too
after
much
this.
new stuff to talk about in this game. So instead of listening to me, take a look at this sneak peek.
All right. Is it going
Is
to
it gonna
be
be the exact same thing you just showed?
Let's run it back. Okay.
That music's so good.
Okay, it's different. We're good. This is how Sonic Adventure started.
Talk about your low budget flights. October 25th. Whoa! They nailed it.
Okay,
God, that
now we're
office.
getting
Whenever I
footage
see
that
it, I
was
think
just
about the
shown.
Isabelle trailer now.
Now we're getting that footage that was just shown. Here
His
we go.
classic top hat. So I wonder if, like, I mean, not to say that like it's fully done, but it seems to be. I wonder what caused it, like another. What took it until the summer to release it in North America?
I guess it's a lot
I
of
don't know. I'm
translating.
glad that we're like getting pretty synonymous releases nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god, I spent so many nights just like catching bugs on that island. Oof.
It's beautiful.
There were.
I know with the old Animal Crossing, they had to localize it to each of the regions. Like I remember with the 3DS version in particular, there was, for example, like if you went to the island too many times, you would eventually get a tan. And like you know, in the West, they had to kind of change that because like you can't like it essentially like you're becoming black.
Yeah.
Like
That was actually kept in.
Was it really?
That was actually kept in. Yeah, yeah. It wasn't until like New Horizons that you could actually pick your character's skin
Nintendo
color.
3DS
But yeah, no, you would
overall
basically just get a
feels
tan in the at least in New Leaf. I think that was the case for the earlier games too. Or maybe it was just New
like
Leaf.
Disney Epic Mickey, Power of Illusion,
But
Right.
Where did he
Scribblenauts
come from?
Unlimited, And
It was shown off in like a previous
Ice
direct.
King, Why do you steal our
Hey!
garbage? Are coming
Why did
over
you
the
steal our
next few
garbage,
weeks.
Ice King?
And on top of all that, franchises
It's Reggie's
like
secret
Animal
identity.
Crossing and
I wonder where
Fire
they
Emblem
were
are
in
coming to the
2012. I guess that was like
of 2013.
no, those honestly those
There's
look
never
like
been a
the
better time to
GameStop
jump into
exclusive
the
figures that
Nintendo
they released for the
3DS
Pokemon
experience.
games.
We'll leave you today
Because
with
it's
a quick
Giratina,
overview of
Ho,
key titles
Lugia, I think
coming your
Dialga on
way
the
over
right.
No, I
the
was
next
looking
few
in the
weeks
bottom
and
left.
Oh.
Thanks so much
Oh,
for
you're
joining
right.
That
us
might be Amiibo.
and for your ongoing support of Nintendo.
Yeah, have they?
3DS.
No, because they show them off in that Smash trailer. We're really just like gritting our teeth until we can get to 2013. Whoa! Nintendo made this
Whoa,
one.
what is this game?
Epic montage.
Wait,
I'm a
this
fan.
is like the second visual reel of the direct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They really
I
gotta.
think it
Because
is.
normally the direct's like 15 minutes. I was went. Oh!
Oh hell
Wow.
yeah! This game, I think is. I thought isn't this game like pretty bad? The Lego.
I played it on
the-
console.
Didn't they show it off last time though?
Yeah, I will say though, it's not like the character I want the most, but if I could lock in a pretty safe bet for next Smash Bros, I think a Monster Hunter character is a pretty safe call.
I guess.
That or like I don't know, Leon Kennedy. As far as third parties go.
I could see Leon.
Yo, they should make this HD and release it for $60.
They should barely make it HD.
Dude, I should finish this game. Dude, I remember I played like all of Dark Moon back in like 2012 or 2013. I was probably 2013 until I got to the last level and I like died and I just never finished.
I slammed my 3DS down in rage. Well, that is, I believe, all of the additional segments we have. And that was everything we wanted to cover. We got information on Tomodachi Life. I'll report back next week with even more after a couple hours. And if you're watching this on the YouTube channel right now, I'm going to stream this, actually co-stream on the YouTube channel tomorrow, starting the total Tomodachi Island series. I've been inspired by my good close personal friend Anders. And we had a riveting discussion here today, really just dreading what the future of speculation looks like. Thank you so much for joining us, PushDustIn.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And I really, it honestly means a lot that you have not only seen the Smash videos, but also liked them, because they're, the first one I understand, but like the later ones, like this can't be palatable for anyone. Like it's so long and they get so personal towards the tail end.
No, I really enjoyed like this, like you weaving like your personal experiences with the everything that was happening and kind of breaking it down week by week. Like I listened to it like the other day, like while working, and it just like was super nostalgic for me. So thank you for taking the time to create that.
Thank you for liking it at all. I appreciate that. That is everything we have to cover on today's installment of Switch 2 Ultra. There were some live-action Zelda leaks, but I believe we can cover those next time in a more kind of separated, just random stuff, because I think next week doesn't really have as many stories. We shall see going forward. But does anyone have anything else they'd like to...
that.
Oh?
You
That's
say
true.
that,
They could
but I
just announce something today.
Yeah, no, they could just announce something like that. I can't imagine how many. I still remember the fucking mind-blowingness of us doing a show live, and then all of a sudden it's like, by the way, here's an update to Donkey Kong Country Returns HD.
Adding Dixie Kong to the
Dixie
game.
Kong.
That was literal breaking news. So I'm glad we've shifted this to Tuesday. That it seems to be, because like they'll release things on Thursday, but it seems like now more and more Tuesday. Well, I guess we'll have to be ready for next Tuesday. I don't think there's any major release this Thursday, but we do have a couple more weeks until the release of Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. We are still waiting on the release date for Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave and the release date for Duskbloods, as well as, you know, potential games that people have been talking about, like maybe Star Fox. We don't know. So a lot more coming out about the Switch 2. I think we're really just gearing up for that summer. We're almost at the tail end of the first year of the Switch 2, and I think we've had some really valuable experiences and really valuable games. But this has been Switch 2 Ultra. I am your co-parent, BHultra.
And I am your co-parent, Switchy.
And I am your Funkle, Dan.
And
And that was this special guest, Will / PushDustIn. Thank you so much for having me.
now we're all legally official members of Source Gaming. I'm the CEO.
Yeah.
It's all paper. It's all in verbal contract. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm hanging up and doing the outro. Thank you so much. All right, so post-show, chatters. I will be live tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the YouTube channel, on this YouTube channel, starting a new show called Total Tomodachi Island. There are 22 islanders on my Total Tomodachi Island. Every week, someone will be eliminated. I haven't decided how we're going to do eliminations yet. I have decided, however, either on Twitch or on YouTube, that you are allowed to donate. I said there was like a $5 minimum. Yeah, if you donate $5, you can pledge your money towards one of the campers and give them immunity for that day. But if someone else donates a little bit more, let's say $6, they can undo that immunity. We'll explain more tomorrow, but for right now, whenever I sit in this chair for so long, I get so goddamn sweaty. I'm gonna let the song play. Does gift count as money? Like